It has it that he's gonna fight for the UFC.
I did fucking he's gonna take it down, fucking run it. So
Yeah, that's it.
What do you mean? Then you said Hamzat's still gonna fight. Say it again.
The rumor has it that he's gonna fight for the UFC.
I did fucking he's gonna take it down, fucking run down.
Well, I wonder what he does after that. Say if Hamzat did take him down, he'd fucking choke him out. What do you do after that? Would he stay at 205, go back down to 185?
Am I wrong? That's a terrible fucking match.
I mean, right now,
I'm just saying.
obviously there's a puncher's chance, but if Hamzat ends up getting on top of him, getting a wrist ride, but again, Pereira's fucking huge.
That motherfucker shoots halfway across the cage. And fucking just
Pereira's walking around, he's gonna walk in the cage probably 230.
His takedown defense isn't good. It doesn't matter. Fucking he was 30 pounds left, 40 pounds left. It doesn't matter. I mean, I think it's a bad fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be crazy because the right now Pereira is such a big star for the UFC to pick that.
That'd be dumb. That's not confirmed, man.
Who would you take in that fight?
Me?
Yeah, both of you guys.
But I just Pereira's taking down Cameron. Or choked or just get his teeth crashed, broken down from getting strangled.
I feel like Hamzat might take him down. Might take him down, get on his back, and Pereira will be like, "Fuck, I've never had someone on my back like this."
Yeah,
cranking his face off.
Dude, fucking, he just look at his last fight weight cuts. That fucking thing. I would. He'd be more inclined to stay on the weight cut than fucking.
Yeah, for sure. Well, boys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that show. Comment your thoughts below. Hit that like and subscribe button. I think 190 is not. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the NFL Stuff. Okay, let's get started. Tom Aspinall predicts UFC champions in 2025. With 2024 coming to a close, a lot of pundits and fighters are being asked to predict who they think will be the UFC's champions in 2025. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video to help support the channel. Recently, Tom Aspinall was asked to make his picks for the men's titles, and surprise, surprise, the Rising Star is predicting he will hoist the UFC's unified heavyweight title. 2024 saw several weight divisions receive new champions, some of which included bantamweight, featherweight, welterweight, and middleweight divisions. So when Tom Aspinall was asked his picks, here's some of what he had to say. At flyweight, Aspinall picked Alexandre Pantoja to retain the title, since he noted that Muhammad Mokaev is no longer in the UFC. At bantamweight, Aspinall said it'd be between Rob and Umar, I think. I don't know if this is an interesting fight, but I would back Merab, I think. For featherweight, the interim heavyweight champion stated, featherweight, I'd say Lerone Murphy will be getting up there this time next year, but I still don't think he'll win a title just yet. I think that'll probably be the year after. I think Ilya Topuria will still be the champion this time next year. Aspinall also picked both Islam Makhachev and Belal Muhammad to retain their crown. He also noted, people overlook Belal. I think Belal's massively underrated, and I think he's still going to be the champion next year. In the middleweight discussions, Aspinall had this interesting take. I've picked against Durkin so many times, and I'm not going to do it again. But I think to say Khamzat Chimaev is not going to be the champion this time next year is silly, so I'm going to say Khamzat. When it came to light heavyweight, Aspinall ultimately could not pick between Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev in terms of who will be the champion. I think Alex Pereira, I don't know. I think he's got a tough fight with Magomed Ankalaev. I think that's a really tough fight. So I don't know what happens. I'm going to be on the fence. It's going to be one of them two. And as noted, when asked about heavyweight, naturally, Aspinall predicted he'll defeat John Jones and the undisputed heavyweight king. What do you think, Aspinall's predictions? If you think he's right, let's move on to Leon Edwards versus JD Edwards. According to MMA reporter Ben P, Leon Edwards' next UFC opponent will be Jack Della Maddalena at UFC 150. At the moment, it's all rumors, but MEP has accurately reported all of JDM's fights in the past. And he's hearing that Leon Edwards versus JDM is the main event for UFC 150. This is what he had to say on his YouTube channel.
I've been informed for the last couple of days, and pretty exciting with an update regarding Jack Della next fight. Now, I've broken all the informed that Jack Della next fight.
literally just every fight. I throw Jack Della versus Sean Brady. Also announced Jack Della versus Kevin Owens, Randy Brown as well, and Gilbert Burns. So I would say I've got pretty good sources when it comes to Jack Della. And this is a very trusted source. This is what I've been told that Jack Della Maddalena is going to be fighting Leon Edwards at UFC London in March 27th, I believe this event will be. 22nd, sorry, not 27th, I don't worry about that one. So March 22nd will be UFC Fight Night, Edwards versus Della Maddalena, more than likely or not.
What are your thoughts on this fight? Let us know down in the comment section below. Nato Moicano interested in fighting Max Holloway for BMF title. And Nato Moicano has some work to do at UFC 11 on January 18th. Namely, getting by Benito Benavides. But if Money is victorious on that night, don't be shocked if Moicano calls for a BMF title fight with Max Holloway. Moicano has been tapped to fight the veteran lightweight contender next month after winning 4 straight bouts. Most recently, Moicano went to town on Benoit Sampson and recorded a TKO win due to doctor stoppage. That victory left Money in the number 9 spot of the UFC's lightweight division, well ahead of his scrap with Dariush. Brazilian fighter spoke with MMA Fighting when asked whether he was interested in fighting less for his BMF round. Not surprisingly, Money said yes. I would love to do that, especially Max Holloway now says he's done at 145. If he really wants to be a 155er, I think that would be an awesome fight, especially because that's going to put me on 100% if you beat Max Holloway. You're fighting for the title. It's a fight I would be willing to take 100%. That's a good call out. Maybe you gave me some ideas for after the fight. Of course, Holloway versus Moicano is a scrap a lot of hardcore fans would to see. But given that Dana White revealed this last summer, the UFC already had a plan.
Alright, boys, who we betting on?
However you bet, it's working. Okay, it's like hard luck bet. It would become surprising if Moicano was next. The outspoken and charismatic fighter has definitely been building up his fan base in the last year or so. But is Moicano as big of a name yet as other fighters who have competed with the likes of Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and Holloway? Probably not. But what do you think? Would you like to see Holloway defend the BMF belt against Moicano? And do you believe that could come next if Moicano defeats Dariush? Referee offers advice to Dana White and the UFC. Big John McCarthy has been working as a rules analyst during PFL broadcasts. The legendary ref believes that the UFC could benefit from adding the belt. Not only that, McCarthy said he'll pick up the phone if the UFC was interested in bringing him on board. If you're an old school fan, you know that McCarthy was the referee for dozens of massive and historic fights before he retired from refereeing in 2019. In more recent years, McCarthy worked as a commentator and analyst for Bellator. Following the PFL's acquisition of Bellator, Big John has also worked as the aforementioned rules analyst, similar to what other leagues like the NFL have during their broadcasts. More recently, McCarthy spoke with MMA Junkie. He said this while discussing whether he'd be interested in working as a rules analyst in the UFC. Absolutely. I don't know if the UFC would want me, but yeah, I could do it with the UFC.
that becomes. There was a fight in MMA, and the timing could not have been worse. It was one of the biggest fights ever in MMA. Are you ready for that? Demetrius Johnson versus Dominic Cruz. And they fought at a time before Demetrius was Demetrius, before the 12-0, before the greatest ever, before 125 pounds even existed. So later when it did, you know, the reigning 35-pound champion with the reigning 25-pound champion. Like, that is quite literally the definition of when we do these, what we call super fights, champion versus champion. Just for example. But I could go back 1 year, and there was a throwaway. There was a last minute, it was not the plan. The attempt was Israel Adesanya. And it was a rematch. It was versus Strickland. And then you had UFC 300 coming up. So you had a lot of stuff going on 300 that you needed to happen before to build potential what-ifs for that night. And there was a card in January in Canada. And it ended up being headlined by two guys that had no direct ties to Canada. And really not even to each other. One was a squeaky wheel who didn't like being an undercard under Bo Nickel named Dricus du Plessis. And one was a brand new champion who the night he won it was ranked out of the top 5 and was a 6-1 underdog when he walked to the ring named Sean Strickland. So the plan here was very clear. The plan had played out 2 months before on Fight Island. That was between Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev. It was a #1 contenders match. Everything is figured out for this card in Canada, opposite Sean Strickland, and it all would have been smoke. It was one of these things where you had this timing issue. Dricus, right place, right time, turns in to a 25-minute war that is very controversial by you guys to this day. To this day, that is greatly debated. Sean Strickland has never thought that was the right call. He never thought it was a fair opportunity that he didn't get an immediate rematch. In fact, the guy that he beat in Adesanya got an opportunity to Dricus before he got an opportunity. It's one of these things. Sean Strickland did not cling to that belt like most champions. I mean, Sean would do interviews and let you know, I've got this for now, but it's not going to be here long. I'm fighting for other things. This is a means to it. He really meant that. Hey, take the belt back. Don't take the belt back. That night I flew in and fought Izzy on short notice. If the belt wasn't there, Sean still would have flown in and fought Izzy on short notice. That's true. So in that regard, the belt really was not all that meaningful to him until it was gone. I do not know, and there has been some guys that have been champions, and it meant a lot to them. It's kind of one of their secrets to success, that everything wasn't about that. They went through the process, and then the wins and the titles become a byproduct. That is a piece, and there's been some guys that are equal right there with Strickland. I've never seen somebody want his belt back more than Strickland. He never did another interview again. He never threw a punch at anybody again. He never had a fight coming up again where he did not make it very clear that he was coming to get that belt back, whoever had it. And I just tell you that because Dricus was such a different person in January of last year. He was such a different character in the world of MMA. He was truly a guy that had won one fight that you could name. If somebody made you as an MMA fan, tell me one guy Dricus has fought, you could not do it. Save Robert Whittaker, for example. And if you were really good, like you were really an astute fight fan, you may be able to grab a second one. You might be able to produce the name Darren Till. Maybe. And the biggest thing that Dricus had done that gave us meaning as he interrupted the idea of Bo Nickel being on a main card with him as an undercard. I will never forget the way Dricus went about that. It is maybe the biggest piece of this whole story, truly. You know, if you have a board of dominoes and they all fall, this was the piece that started that. Not a different fight, not a manager, not an interview. He had a very specific problem. And it was an odd problem. Because it wasn't with his opponent. It wasn't with a signed opponent. It wasn't with what appeared to be a future opponent, at least at that time. He had a problem with something completely different, and it was an opportunity going, in this case, to Bo Nickel, who was debuting. And Dricus simply did not believe we should be on the same card, and you're debuting on a main card, and I'm not. It was an interesting point. And Dricus was screaming this as loud as he could on his Twitter handle, to which I went to and saw. And the number for sure within the hundreds, but sometimes when I think of it, he had 241, and sometimes when I think of it, he had 441. Like, I get that number a little confused in my head, but I could absolutely guarantee you at the time that he started complaining, he was in the 3 digits for Twitter followers. It was one of the smallest Twitter accounts in all of MMA. And I bring you that because I barely heard his argument. One of the dirt sheets, right, one of the rags, either Elbow or Mania, one of the places I go, pick the story up. I kind of looked into it just a little bit. And I remember never really thinking about Dricus in that matter, just kind of thinking about Bo. And I would think, Bo's coming off the Contender Series, and he did it twice, and there's a thing behind him, and you kind of got to feature him in a TV match. Like, I remember kind of being trying to intellectual about it. And all because of that squeaky wheel, he ends up getting that main card fight. That was the one against Darren Till, in fact. Which parlays him into other media opportunities, which parlays, and this whole thing's going to come to a screeching halt when he gets in there with Robert Whitaker. Like, Robert Whitaker is another game. That is a mess that very few have figured out. So, that wasn't even some feature match, right? Whitaker will be in the Hall of Fame someday. Dricus will be in the Hall of Fame someday. That is going to be looked on very much like the example I gave you of Demetrius Johnson and Dominic Cruz, where you go, wow, that happened? Oh, what was that night like? Oh, I bet the fight fans everywhere were so excited and looking forward to it. It was just one of these things with the timing. The timing wasn't perfect. Dricus versus Whitaker will be looked at like that. Dricus versus Strickland now. Here we are, a year after it happened the first time. And the first time was so uneventful leading into it that it wasn't even a match that we went for. The match that we went for was the winner of Chimaev versus Kumar. When Chimaev comes up lame with a broken hand, it wasn't even the neck, it wasn't even the bridesmaid. The way the story, which is likely not to be told accurately, but behind play, it went to Izzy. When Izzy couldn't make the date for whatever reason that was, it fell on Dricus, who turns out to be awesome. He turns out to be really interesting. He turns out to be a very handsome and charming guy. He carries his own at press conferences. He went on something called The Masked Singer. You guys know about this? And he sang under a mask. And he's got like this incredible voice, and he takes the mask off and he Dricus. I mean, I'm just sharing for you like what Dricus has done in the last year to make himself interesting to you guys. If 1 year ago I told you, all right, you're in charge, put Dricus in a main event and make sure this is profitable, you'd go, what? How? How am I possibly going to do that? If I came back to you now and said, all right, put Dricus in a card. By the way, where are you going to put him? You go, main event. Right, that's a big difference. A guy that has 3 digits in Twitter followers and is now one of the most respected guys in the entire sport. He only had a year to do it. And it's a very different fight. Dricus versus Strickland now is very different. These guys haven't even got started yet. They will go do what they both do as well as anybody, and that's going to really turn into something special. But it does make you think back, what a difference the day makes, right? As this year comes to an end, and you're looking back at different things that have changed in the world of MMA. I think that Diego Lopez would go into the category of one of the biggest stars, one of the biggest emerging stars of the year. I think that Dricus is in front of him. And I think that time passed so quickly. Sometimes we think of Dricus as this old veteran. I think for some of you, it's going to be a surprise when you realize he has not been champion, not even for one full calendar year.
Riding a Uber is actually really easy. You can ride in 5 easy steps. Step 1, download the Uber app. Step 2, open the app and type in your destination. Step 3, choose a ride. They have options for any budget, and large or small cars to fit your needs. Step 4, confirm your pickup spot. Step 5, once your driver arrives, sit back, relax, and even share your trip with loved ones so they can follow along. No need to worry about finding parking, how much it'll cost, and who's driving. Download the Uber app.
So,
We are live, boys. A sample of life on YouTube. We are live, boys. A sample of life on YouTube. We are live, boys.
red pill.
K Dog, what's up, brother? Chilling, chilling. Hey, have a good one, brother.
Don't confuse
I'm going something. I appreciate it, brother. I appreciate it. Of course, of course, of course. All right, bet, man. Sounds good.
Sausages, man. You and I have been carrying on for about 15 minutes here before you started, and I hope that makes the show. We actually had some very interesting stuff that we were just discussing. One championship, Anatoly, who's a 3-division champion. But people recognizing him on the street, it's harder to do, and it's one of those spots where how do you become a star? Because for so long we believed in because it was about skill. But we now find out that's not true. There's another side, and we don't get to choose. The fan chooses. And there's something to the drama side that used to be left out of martial arts that now appears to be front and center.
Well, I think all the drama side, we can thank you for that, because there's a point in time in your career where you came up, you showed up, you know, you didn't wear the glasses, you have this nice little gangster swag. Now you kind of like paved the way for that. Right before Conor, there was Chael Sonnen, and I felt like you did a great job at it.
Your shirt's
when
inside
you
out.
had your fights with. I felt the biggest one.
I just threw some on.
And then even John Jones, and then the list goes on. Even now, you know, I saw you just drop a diss track against, you know, the Kendrick and Drake. You're like, I don't know who this is. Defamation. You're talking about Jorge Masvidal. I think we all have to thank you for, you know, paving the way for the drama.
That's a huge call. You've never told me that, and I really appreciate that. And you were such a sportsman that I've always thought, I think Demetrius doesn't like it. Like, I just bet he doesn't.
No,
He's
I love
such a
you.
sportsman. He probably looks at me like this picture. And, you know, to be remembered for anything in this sport is pretty rare, right? I mean, you're in a status as the GOAT, but to be remembered for anything is so. That means a lot to me. If you think they got paved the way, and I'll tell you what, I was inspired, and this might surprise you. I always get asked about that Conor or Chael or who was better, something fun like this, but I feel like they're leaving somebody out with Rampage. Rampage was the first guy if I was watching parties in my living room or something, he was the first guy ever where people would tell her, quiet, 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 when it was time for him to do his interview. They wouldn't do it all night long, and then quiet, quiet, you want to hear what Rampage said. But moreover, I trace it back personally to Tank Abbott. I thought Tank Abbott was the first ever to come out and do away with some of this honor and respect and make it a little bit more about a show. And he was more of like a beer drinking. It was a different thing, but I still felt like it started with Tank Abbott. That's just my opinion.
No, I think it's amazing. No, I never hated you. I thought it was absolutely entertaining, and you had great fights. I mean, I work at a local UFC fit gym.
I'm in the studio. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for coming in. And I'll have to be
We're back in Vegas, brother.
At a local UFC fit gym, and they played that fight of you fighting Anderson Silva all the time, and the pressure, and you beating him up on his feet, and then you taking a fight to him. right? Like a lot of people when they fight Anderson Silva, he had this mystical aura about him. But you're like, nah, I'm gonna take it to him, and you damn near almost beat him. Like you look at all the short cards, you're up. It was probably 50-45, 50-44, 50-43, and then he just caught you at the very end. So you've had some amazing fights in the UFC in your career. So I don't think that's gonna be the one thing you remember about. Is you being the forefront of the drama, creating the drama, and make it more of a show. I think you have some amazing fights. So don't sell yourself short.
I appreciate that. Hey, can I tell you something? I really do appreciate that. Thank you. If I can tell you one thing about that fight, right? And when you lose something, sometimes you don't ever want to tell somebody why, because it quickly goes in the category of excuse. So then you do, well, I'm not making an excuse. But I do want to tell the story. If it's an excuse, fine. I think it's an interesting story. I had never been 5 rounds before. And I had been scheduled for it. Had a couple of championship matches with a guy named Paulo Kilo in the WEC, but we didn't go all 5. So
Great goes.
this was the height of exhaustion. And I mean, almost like a blur, almost like I was so tired, but I was so determined in that fight. A lot of it came because I was scared. I've got to do it. I've got an urgency. I've got to get him down. I've got to stay busy till the ref lets me stay here. It came from like this urgency, which came from a fear of him. But I'll tell you this, going into the 5th round, my corner tells me it's the 4th round. And I only say that because I was up on the score. You said I was up on the scorecards when I bring this up. Like, I no longer had to beat him. The urgency to get him down wasn't there. The urgency to score wasn't there. I just had to beat the clock. But I didn't know that. And I don't know if that would have changed things. I don't know. I mean, a horse a lot of times does a little better when the barn's in sight. I don't know. I did think there was 2 rounds left, not 1 minute left.
Gotcha. Hey, like I said, it is what it is. I still love the quote when you said, you're like, I didn't tap. I tapped and I thought I lost the round. I was like, that's fucking hilarious.
That is so confusing. There's all sorts of nuances within the unified rule, right? There's glitches and things that still working out. But by any regular standard, I definitely won.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to take this to the beginning, right? I always ask my viewers this. I'm pretty sure that I know you started in wrestling when you were, middle school, high school, child. That was your beginning sport into mixed martial arts, correct?
Yeah, that was it. I came from a wrestling family. Came from a family of wrestlers, and my cousins were the guys that I looked up to. My immediate sibling, I had an older sister, but my cousins all wrestled. My dad was a wrestler. My uncle was a wrestler, even a coach. And so anyway, I mean, yes, I couldn't wait. Could not wait till they finally let me have a segment.
What's going on, this podcast is sponsored by only best energy drink out in the world, and that is you can find GFuel. I go to gfuel.com. Use my promo code money, and I'll give you 20% on GFuel. My favorite flavor is the thing about the podcast, more, but also everything boxing, Muay Thai, or anything like that. Correct?
Yeah, and I had a fantasy though. So everybody's got rules in their house, and we're probably pretty similar. But also every family and house has rules that are, hey, this, don't do this one. And for my sister and I, do not skip school. And the reason for that is just, if you're skipping, if you're leaving, just call us and tell us. We don't want to think you were somewhere and you're not there. All right, fine. So I never did it. I never skipped school. And there was one class. I skipped the class. I went with my buddy Jeff Williams. We grabbed something called a VHS cassette of something called the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and we went and watched it. And I was 17 years old, 1993, and I went home that day. I immediately confessed to my father what I had done. I said, but Dad, I found out what I want to do. I found out what I want to spend some time in my life committed to. And he was very interested. I didn't get in trouble at all. I explained to him. He did not understand. My dad was a wrestler, he was boxing, but he did not understand. Trying to explain, Dad, there's no rules. These guys are in a cage. He insisted that it was wrestling and that I was just a mark, that I wasn't understanding what Vince McMahon was doing. I'm like, no, this is not wrestling. They're in a cage and they're fighting. And at any rate, I finally had to get him The VHS. And I tell you that because that was 1993, and when it was time for me to go to college, I was such a fan. At that time in the country, there was 6 Gracie certified gyms, but only 6. Like finding a black belt back then was very difficult. So of these 6 gyms, one of them was Pedro Sauer's gym, and it was in Utah. So I ended up signing a letter of intent and going out under Mark Schultz at Brigham Young University. And I'm Catholic. Like it was kind of hard to be in a Mormon school, but there was a Gracie certified gym that I could get to. So I could cheat and get these workouts. And everybody was just one discipline back then. You're a wrestler, you're a judo guy. Yep. So I was going to cheat the system. I was going to get these jiu-jitsu workouts while wrestling at the college and be all ready when I came out. And it was just one of those things where I thought I was ahead of the curve, but of course that long changed by the time I graduated.
Well, it's kind of fascinating to see that it was the VHS. You skipping school, getting the VHS, going home, watching it, and tell you that, hey Dad, I mean what you know right now, I skipped school, but there's a positive. I found out what I want to do for the rest of my life. Well, part of my life, and it was mixed martial arts, and that was the impetus start of it, right? Right there is where I became a fan and knew that I wanted to do it. As I got to my senior year in high school, or I apologize, in college, Dan Henderson and Randy Couture were training partners. And they didn't have a gym, they didn't have a coach. They had a place that they went, which was a gym that let them in. And then they just got together every day. They'd have a clock and they'd have a sheet, and they were super disciplined to do it. And they were the top guys in the country. They were the guys that were ranked number 1 and expected to go off to the Olympics. So when I found about this workout, I started showing up. And I didn't have the social sense to go and ask them. I just started showing up. And they let me in, and eventually, we all said hi to each other. And I got used to doing this. It was for over a year. So when the Olympic trials were done, I went back to practice at 3 o'clock, like Pavlov's dog, like I've been doing. And they were not wearing shoes, and they had gloves, and they threw me a pair. And they said, we're doing this now. And there was never a conversation. I went back to the same place every day. It's crazy. Eventually, we named it Team Quest. Eventually, we got a guy to come in and go, hey, I want to coach you guys in the team room. We even put a sign up and started signing people up. And that is the beginning of Team Quest right there. Dan, Randy, and I tagged along. Wow, that's incredible. That's the thing I loved about the old school of mixed martial arts, right? Like you said, 1993, you guys didn't really have coaches. Like me and Matt Hume, he never had a coach. He was just walking down the street in Kirkland. His dad taught him boxing. He did some kickboxing. He wrestled his whole entire life. But when he was walking one day in Kirkland, he said, "Oh, I saw HMT, and it was the American Kickboxing Academy." He went there. Then him and the master, and he was beating everybody up. Then him and the master at the time, Haru, they started sparring hard. And then that's when he was like, holy shit, you're actually pretty good. That's when we learned Muay Thai. And then you have Maurice Smith, you have all these old guys. And then they would just all train together, and they would all go off and fight in extreme cage fighting. Like, you almost have that same story. Well, that's everybody's story at that time, right? Besides the Gracies, they just focused on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so they had a coach, but you guys never truly had a coach. And those were the guys we looked up to, by the way. It was Maurice Smith and Matt Hume, like everybody in the Northwest. Randy Couture, for example, hadn't really got his comeuppance. And I worked out one day with this guy, never met him before. He had no shirt on, and he wore a jock. He wore a jock with a cuff, but he wore that over his shorts. So, like, when you see him, he's got this real dude. And he tuned us all up so bad. He was a smaller guy, and his name was Dennis Ullman. And, I mean, he did things we didn't know existed in terms of the ground and the jiu-jitsu, and then he verbally abused us as he did it. Like, I went home and told my dad, I met the best fighter in the world today. And Dennis Ullman would tell me stories about a guy. So, like, the horror stories that I would tell my dad about how skilled Dennis was, Dennis would tell me about Matt Hume. And he said, man, you have no idea. And Dennis doesn't call Matt Hume a kickboxer. He calls him a trick boxer. Because Dennis says Matt has everything he does, he fools him and gets him. He thinks he's going to kick and he punches him. Dennis is not huge on compliments. But boy, he had a respect for Matt Hume. And then you had the Salberries, you had the Josh Burnett's all coming out of that gym. And I thought Matt Hume formed the AMC. I didn't know that was he or you just taught me something. Yeah, that was Haru. Haru was like basically AMC, like he was there, and he came over from Japan, Hawaii. And then when Matt was just the story he told me, he was walking around trying to find a gym to train at. because he grew up in Kirkland, he found there. And then it was like him and Matt kind of formed it. But Haru started it, and then Matt came in and basically took over and brought the submission wrestling style to that gym, right? Like, I'm gonna have Matt on the Mighty Cast one of these days. I'm gonna hear, I don't even know his full story, because I'm like, dude, how do you learn all this? And he goes, I taught myself. And I'm like, how the hell do you teach yourself? And he's like, I look at people who do good things, like Ernesto Cruz. He would throw the high kick behind your head. I will study that, and then I'll make it mine, and then I'll implement it. And so he has a whole story that I haven't even heard about. But from what he told me, it was Haru, and then Matt came in, and then they built this, amazing team where they were all come together, like Maurice Smith, Ivan Salisbury. But Maurice Smith was a very high-level kickboxer, and then Matt kind of taught him some wrestling. But they all kind of taught each other and worked with each other.
Matt Hughes is the master even amongst coaches. Like, just for example, if you had a group of very respected coaches and they were arguing about a technique, they were saying, I really think your toe needs to go this way, and I think you got to extend. Like, if they were arguing and debating it, and Matt Hughes walked in and said, this is how you do it, and the argument would stop, and they would all go, that's how you do it. Told you. It's one of those things. And he was ahead of everybody, and I didn't see, I'm so curious about the Matt Hughes story, too, because when I got there, he was already there. He knew all the submissions, and there was one other guy, and they ended up having a rivalry. That guy's name is Eric Paulson, who is now a coach himself. And those two ended up fighting at least twice, but the point was they were so far ahead of the curve in the philosophy, in understanding what it needed to be, so then they did start teaching themselves. And that's a real thing. I watched another guy do that. The late, great Evan Hanner was out of Amarillo, Texas, and he used to clear out the coffee table, and he'd get the Black Belt magazine, and once a month they would show a move, and he'd be still shots, and he'd be trying to break it down. Then he ordered the VHS cassettes, and I knew about those because I had the same one. He went all the way to the finals of the World Championship with that. When he finally got a gym, he won the World Championship, but he made it to the finals. He had it to the title match just off of those VHS and a big heart and open mind.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Like I said, the guys back in the day, they learned how to fight and learned how to teach themselves. So I felt like the depth of the athletes back in the day. Obviously you have kids now starting in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and like my kids, they started at 10 years old in Jiu-Jitsu. So if they get to 37, they stay on the track. They're going to be so much better than I would ever have been. But I felt like the athletes back in the day, they have to learn and teach themselves. So their ceiling of growth was it was super high because you can always learn new stuff, and you've already taught yourself. Then you have somebody else come in here and teach you. It just even magnifies. That makes sense, right? Like when Matt would teach me, he'd say, "I'm gonna teach you the concept of fighting. I'm not gonna teach you. Okay, if your opponent does this, you do this, and if he does this, you do that." That's just teaching somebody. That's just teaching dog. Like when I say, bark, you bark. So for me, it's been able to magnify my game because, like, I know how to fight. I know the concept of fighting, essentially. So I'm glad we see eye to eye now. Well, I want to fast forward. Talk me to your pro career. Like, I felt like you fought everywhere. You fought. I feel like you fought in Bulldog. Yeah. You fought in Affliction. Walk us through your path to where you got to get to the last organization you fought.
Bulldog. They don't get any credit, but the memories. Memories are great. WBC, just had the greatest memories. And then you got your horror stories, too. You got your horror stories. In fact, I fought a guy named Trevor Franklin. And it was the biggest crowd. I was a lifelong wrestler. Oh, my God. I could not believe how many people came. Oh, I was high on life. I just showed up. There was about 190 people there. But I had never performed in front of this many people that were all watching me. Even in a wrestling tournament, you got all these different matches. So it was just a special environment. Trevor and I had a match, and he submitted me at 7 minutes and 31 seconds of the match. But it was a 7-minute match. The promoter enjoyed it, so he let it just keep going. And when he told us that, we did not argue. That is the way that it worked back then. We had no problem with that at all. And, so he asked me about my path. It was just kind of an interesting thing. And that building we did that in, the 190 plus people, something called the Roseland. I did that when I was in college, and I happened to have a business class. I wrote a paper for the business class about how I could sell out the Roseland, and I have been their exclusive promoter for the last 24 years. We've done 134 shows there with 121 sellout crowds. In fact, you might have heard a number of years ago that we got John Jones and Dan Henderson together. That was just a grappling match. But we're the ones that hosted that. And so that Rosen that used to do 190, now it's a big deal, at least in this part of the state or part of the country. And that was just kind of how I started it. I started as a fan, which is exactly how I end up. That's how I am now. I watched. I came along those journeys. They never wrapped your hands, and that was optional if you didn't want to wear gloves. Art Jefferson, we just lost him 2 days ago. Rest his soul. But I'll tell the Jefferson story. He got in there with one boxing glove. Well, you could. There wasn't a commission. Yeah. I was on my 7th fight before I ever saw a skate. You would talk about weight classes, but that would get called in a month or so in advance. Your coach would ask you what you weigh. Most guys would lie. They 200 pounds and claim they were 170. You had this whole game going on. Or even the story I tell you about Trevor, where the time just kept going in. So then we started to have rivals, we started to have commission, and then started to have weight classes. And when I started, I thought I'm going to be able to beat everybody. I was a smaller guy, 165, something like this. And I think, I'm going to have to beat Dan Severn. I'm going to have to beat Mark Coleman. Because there weren't weight divisions, and then when opportunity started to present itself, the sport also started to form. In fact, Demetrius, before we were on air, you were telling a story that a promoter can have so much pull that he can decide a match even though maybe that's not the way it's intended to do. I had one of those that went for me. These stories always go against you. This went for me. I was 9-2, and Joe Silva had made it very. If you had 2 losses, things weren't looking very promising, right?
Yeah.
And Joe Silva had made it very clear, if you get another one, your time of emailing and bothering me can come to an end. All right. So I thought it was called Rubble and Rock. BJ Penn was putting it on. It was the main event. Flew out there on short notice to take on a guy called Homer Moore. And they gave Homer the win. And BJ Penn's father came in the back, took the win from Homer right in front of the pin and cash, gave it to me, and let us all know Homer lost in jail when he reversed the decision. And that holds to this day. If you go look at, and by the way, Homer did not argue. He let the money go, and that's the way it was. But that's kind of like the story I was telling you about Trevor. He didn't argue back then. Things like this happen. So I think that was the bigger part of the story of my career, which is the question you asked. It wasn't necessarily the holds and the techniques as much as it was the administration and the acceptance. Because when I was in the UFC, I remember getting my haircut in my hometown, and the gal asked me what I did, and I told her wrestling. And the reason I did that is too many people before that I had told UFC that didn't know what it was. I would try to explain it, and they would go, "Oh, well, then you're a boxer. Well, then you're a wrestler." They never got it. And it was to the point that I quit telling. Now I brag. Oh, I love to say mixed martial arts. I love to say things like this, but I came through the time where it was embarrassing to be associated.
Well, I think you came through the time where if you did it, fucking loved it, right? You love the act of combat. You love to test yourself against the best of the world. I'm not saying athletes nowadays don't have the same level. Like you said, there are no rules. You didn't care about weight classes. You either take your hands, you did it. If the promoter thought you lost, you truly did lose. He takes your, he's like, okay, well, the crowd and the judges think you won, but I'm taking your money and I'm giving it to who I thought won. And here you go, and you have a loss. And this stays true. Because like you said, there was no commission back in the day. There was no sanction. It might have been sanctioned, but there was no overhead that oversees you guys, right? Oversees the promoter. And I think those were the best times because you had the true, I'm the one, not the 120, but you just did it because you loved it. Then obviously it got, commercialized where now with UFC, you have UFC, PFL, Bellator, one championship, and you have all these grappling promotions, right? So I think when I look back at that time, I wouldn't say, you might in time feel embarrassed, but I think that was like you guys were the pioneers that got the sport to what it is today. Because without you guys, there would not be big organizations like UFC and One Chip. It just wouldn't happen, right? Could you imagine? You're just like, oh fuck it, you, Randy, Dan Henderson, whoever else is around, take Abbott, like, oh fuck, this is stupid as shit. We're not getting paid. He doesn't care about getting paid. You guys did. I remember when Matt and Eric Paulson fight, he goes, we didn't get paid. We love to do it. We wanted to test ourselves. And that's what got us to New York State with, the UFC and how amazing the sport is. So thank you, Joe, for going through and showing the Bears in the hometown about saying you did UFC.
Demetrius, that was beautiful. I don't know if you realize what a big compliment you just gave me or if you meant it that way, but thank you. And while you give it to me, you're talking, this entire generation, I look at the Don Fry and the Dan Severn and the Marco Huas, those guys that transition the sport, and Abbott for that matter. I look at those guys different. And while maybe their skills wasn't the same, I will tell you, Demetrius, I get very cold when guys pull out of fights now. They're asking to go and do it 3 times a year, and also, I don't feel good, or I'm not going to do it, or I can't make the weight class, and it irritates me. But only because my perspective was so different. We used to beg to do it. But you would never ask about the money. My mother hatched a plan to bribe Joe Silva 50 grand to get me a UFC contract. Oh, by the way, my debut opponent was going to be a heavyweight against Andrei Arlovsky. Like, I was going to get killed.
Damn.
But still, we wanted to be in so bad. I gave up so much of my life. The internet wasn't a thing. It was a very different world back then. But I'm just sharing, when guys are complaining they're making 12 and 12 or something on their debut, I'm just not going to feel bad for Demetrius. You just missed it. You missed it by about 5 or 6 years, but we used to do tournaments. And we had 3 guys in one night. And pretty soon the finals started rolling around, and there was always a forfeit, or you had to bring in a substitute. When guys got better, you couldn't fight 3 guys in a night. So they didn't do away with tournaments. The way the story goes is they did away with tournaments. That's not true. They just made a 4-man tournament. We were still fighting 2 guys in a night, and I miss those days. In all fairness, the way we do it now is a much better way. But I will tell you, I only have one resentment to our sport, and that was that you only got asked to do it 3 times a year. Like growing up as a grappler like you, it's like, oh, please, 4 or 5 times every Saturday. And so, 3 times a year is just, it was one of those spots. And so there is some real positives, like the very nice compliment that you paid me about being one of those original guys. But I also think that my mindset's wrong. I think the way they do it now is much better. I think these guys are more respected athletes and more organized. I think this is the right way, but I'm still callous to it.
Yeah, 1000%. I mean,